Want to know about the tone curve in Lightroom? Let's get wild. People of Earth, welcome to Remain Wild. My name is Rick Evans. I'm a wildlife photographer. If you're here today, it's probably because you want to check out the tone curve in Lightroom. This is going to be a good tutorial for beginners so you understand how the tone curve works, what it does, and how to use it. If you have been using Lightroom for a while and you know how to use the tone curve, there might be a few things that you learn, so stick around till the end because you might learn a little trick here and there that you didn't know. There are certainly things in here that I didn't know when I began, so let's just dive right into it. Here we are in Lightroom, and I've already got a picture pulled up here. Let me just collapse all of this so we have a clean workspace that we're looking at here. And I've already got the tone curve opened up here, all right? So when you open up the tone curve, you kind of see this box here, and I'm just gonna break this down step by step, exactly what each one of these things does in here. First, let's start down here at the bottom. You have these point curve sort of presets, okay? This is on linear by default, but when you click medium contrast, it sort of applies some points on the curve automatically and gives you sort of a medium contrast look that you can then go in and fine tune using the points that it gave you, okay? Because remember, when we shoot in RAW, which you should be doing as a photographer, if you have the capability on your camera, shoot in RAW, it gives you a lot more flexibility when you go into post. When you shoot in RAW, it's devoid of contrast. You need to add contrast back into the photo, and one of the ways that we can do that is with the tone curve. That was the medium contrast. When you click strong contrast, same thing happens. It's just a little bit more pronounced and extreme, okay? So you can see it made this dark area darker, lifted some of the light highlight areas to give this more contrast, okay? All right, so next up here in the corner, you got this neat little tool. You just click it and then go into your photo here, and anywhere that you click and drag, it's going to adjust that area of the photo. So see where the point is on the actual tone curve there? Here, let me reset this. As I drag my point around on the actual tone curve box, you see how that point moves around up and down the line? It's telling you what area of the curve you're looking at, like where your pointer is, where your cursor is, okay? So if I move it down here on this brush underneath the bird here, you can see it's all up in the highlight and mid areas because that's the tonality that is present there in this area. If I put it up here in the darkest corner, you can see my point is down there at the bottom, okay? You can literally just like drag just the dark areas down and then drag the highlights up, and there you go. I kind of added some contrast into the photo using that method as well. Just gonna clear all that out. All right, so now up here at the top, you have different selections here. By default, I'm pretty sure it'll just be on the normal point curve selection. This one here, the parametric curve, is kind of a good tool, again, for beginners. If you're just learning how the tone curve works, you might wanna use the parametric curve until you kind of get used to things. But basically, the way it works is, as I move my cursor up and down this line, see how those zones, that like light gray zone sort of changes around the cursor? That's telling me that that's the area that I'm going to be affecting. So if I put a point right here and lift it, it's only going to stay within that range, okay? So I'm not gonna really mess up anything else. So basically, I'm only affecting the highlights. And you can see down at the bottom, see that slider down there? And you can see that little caret on the slider moving up and back and forth on the highlights, because that's the area that I'm affecting, right? So same thing in the middle. You can see, actually that's in the darks there, and then midtones are here, okay? So that's kind of how the parametric curve works if you just want to drag and drop, drag the line up and down manually. You can also just grab the slider and move it back and forth. If you're more comfortable using sliders, this allows you to do that, okay? Now the other thing that you can do that's kind of neat is you can change the range of that zone. So like the shadows here, see how that light gray area kind of corresponds with where this little point is? I can expand that zone, and now it's more pronounced. Okay, so when I can hit the shadows up here, it controls a little bit more range in the tonality of the tone curve, okay? Let's move over to the just general point curve here. This is the way that I typically use it. One method that you might have heard from or might have heard of if you're into photography and videography stuff is an S curve, all right? That's a really common term you'll hear. And I'm just gonna place 3 points on this line. We're gonna just make a real quick S curve. And what that looks like is we're gonna lift the highlights up a little bit, and we're gonna drop the shadows down a little bit, drop the darks, and you just have this subtle S, okay? And that added contrast into our photo, right? See how the darks look a lot darker there? And I may have gone a little overboard there. Let's just do it just a little bit. I'm actually gonna lift the mids up a little bit and lift the highlights up a little bit more. There you go. Now make sure you pay attention to your histogram up here because that'll tell you if you're clipping anything and you don't wanna do that. But that's how that works. And if you ever wanna get rid of any of these points, you can just double click on them and they're gone, all right? So let's move over to the right here. And this one is gonna control the red channel, okay? What you can do is you can actually add color into the different ranges of shadows and highlights using these colored point curves here. So let me explain what I mean here. So in the highlights, let's say, let's do a little 3-point line here. So let's say I want to put a little bit of greens into the shadows. So you see how the shadow area is getting really cyan? I'm gonna just so you can see where it is, right? Just gonna subtly bring that in and then put some reds into the highlights, okay? See what that's doing there? And it just, you know, less is more. If you've watched any of my other tutorials, I'll always say, be subtle, okay? Don't go overboard. Less is more, subtle is the key if you want it to look right, okay? So now we kind of have that orange teal look going here with the teal shadows there. Now let's leave that where it is, move over to the green tab here, and let's do a very similar thing, okay? And we're gonna add some green to the shadow, or actually let's add some purpley magenta to the shadows, and then add some green to the highlights. And what that'll do is it kind of cancels out a little bit of what we just did. See how this photo's starting to look a little bit more stylized, almost like you got some Instagram filter on it or something like that, but you know, it's starting to mess with the colors a little bit more. And then blue, let's do a little 3-point curve here. And we'll add some blues into the shadows and some yellows into the highlights. And there you go. I mean, again, it's a different look. Play around with this, have fun with it, and you can, you know, really get some interesting looks to your photos. Be subtle about it, don't go overboard, because you can get some really, I mean, if you want to have like, you know, you can get some really wacky alien looking stuff going here. Now that might make a cool, like, I don't know, album cover for your band or something like that. For me, nature photography, you want it to look as natural as possible. And I wouldn't do something like that to my poor little bird here. Okay, so now that we've done that, let's, on the subject of stylized photos, let's do this. I'm gonna show you another neat trick to doing some stylization. Now this is something that I do quite often here. I like to do some muted blacks and sort of give it more of like almost like a washed out old school kind of look. And you'll see what I'm talking about here. So let's lift our highlights up a little bit. And I'm watching the histogram up in the corner. All right, so we just are touching the side of the histogram up there, right here. And then I'm gonna bring this over here, bring it down a little bit. But what I'm gonna do, this point down here in the corner, I'm actually gonna drag this up. Now see how it's changing. If you look at the histogram up there, right up here, watch what happens. So right now my shadows are touching the far left side of my histogram, right? Now when I lift this up, I'm saying this is where you stop blacks. They don't go past this point, right? So everything looks a lot more muted and kind of faded, right? So I'm gonna just lift that up. Again, you don't wanna do too far, just to about maybe here, and then drag this down to here. Look at my midtones and just see how that looks, okay. And I kind of like that, all right? it looks kind of cool, right? It's a little bit different, it's a little bit more washed out, looks a little bit more classic or something like that. There's certainly a place for photos like that look like that. All right, so that's pretty much the tone curve. That's how that works. If you have any questions about it, put them down in the comment section below. I will try to answer them as best as I can, as always. If you got value out of this tutorial, please drop some likes, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell. That's how the channel grows, and that's how I can provide you guys with more videos and tutorials like this. This was part of the Fundamental Friday series that I kind of have going on, where every Friday I'm going to try to release a video that gives you guys the fundamentals of photography and videography to get started. So if you're kind of a beginner, make sure you check those out and stay tuned for more. Yeah, that's pretty much all I got for you today, so thanks for stopping by. As always, take care, stay safe, and remain wild.